Hi everybody, I'm Ryan. Today I wanted to talk about some nuances with playing paper Magic, especially if you're coming from a digital platform like Arena or maybe more unrealistically Magic Online. I don't think Magic Online would be many people's beginning Magic format platform thing of choice. Normally it's Arena. So if you're coming from these digital platforms and going to play paper Magic, there's probably a few things that you need to know about. Because culture, actually playing the game, and all of that stuff ends up being kind of nuanced if you're not used to it. So this is going to be for those people that are coming over from a digital platform. The first thing that you need to know about paper Magic is making sure that you communicate. You communicate every little thing, even if you don't think it's relevant or even if you think your opponent's going to see it. Announce everything that you're doing. Maybe not like normal procedural stuff like draw and whatever. I think it's kind of annoying when people do that. But I don't think it's a bad thing. And if what you're doing uses the stack, or you're switching phases, specifically main phase to combat, combat to main phase to end step, give your opponent a chance to respond and wait a reasonable amount of time or wait for them to say yes. Doing this really important communication can avoid messy judge calls. In addition to that, make sure if like a trigger that you don't think your opponent sees is going to happen, make sure you give ample time for your opponent to like actually do the thing that makes that trigger. Again, this is to avoid really messy judge calls. For example, a few weekends ago, I was playing Burn in an RCQ and I was playing against that Beans deck. I had 2 Rolling Vortex on the battlefield and my opponent cascaded. Rolling Vortex says it deals 5 damage to you if you cast a spell without paying its mana cost. He cascaded into a Teferi Time Raveler, and instead of just saying, trigger, you take 10, because you can choose not to cast off of Cascade. In a normal game of Magic, they would just say, well, I don't cast it then. And that's probably where the judge would rule. Instead, I went, are you casting it? And when they said yes, I then went trigger. So really clear communication like that is really important, both for your benefit and also so you, again, avoid those messy judge calls. Speaking of judges, if there's any confusion at all, call a judge. Even if you're going to FNM, there should be some experienced players there that are acting like judges. If not, the TO is acting like a judge. If there's anything weird happening, if there's any even if it's not cheating based, if you're just confused about the board state and something weird is going on, there's a miscommunication, call a judge, have them sort it out. It's not a big deal. It's literally their jobs. Speaking of a cheating thing, unfortunately in paper Magic, it's possible to cheat. And so it's important you watch your opponent. What I see a lot of newer players, especially new paper players, do, and I feel really bad about it, is they kind of just stare down at their hand and stare down at their board 100% of the time. And frankly, even at the FNM level, I would say even more at the FNM level, because people think they can get away with it, that's a dangerous thing to do. It's important to watch your opponent. Make sure they're not drawing extra cards, make sure they're not palming things from their graveyard back to their hand, which happened at a Pro Tour recently, etc. Not a lot of people do it. I would say less than 1% of Magic players do it. But those people that do it need to be caught, and it's important to watch your opponent. Next, maybe misunderstanding about Magic is you can actually take back dexterity errors. So, for example, the obvious one might be tapping the wrong land. You can untap it and tap it again, and then cast a card. As long as you haven't actually cast the card, you can untap and tap as much as you need to. Or maybe something that is really relevant is if you go untap Blood Crypt, tap it, say Ragavan, but cast Ragavan, but lay down a Thoughtseize. Even though that's something that you could cast with that mana and is a legal cast, by saying Ragavan, you make it really clear that you mean to play Ragavan, and you're allowed to take that Thoughtseize back to your hand and actually put Ragavan on the battlefield. Anything that's a dexterity error, or especially an obvious dexterity error, you can actually take back in paper Magic, as long as it was a dexterity error and you weren't necessarily trying to get information out of your opponent. Again, that's up to the judge's discretion. No matter what tournament you're going to, whether it's FNM or an RCQ or whatever, make sure you arrive early, and if it's REL, competitive rules enforcement level, make sure that you fill out a deck reg, which, by the way, you can do beforehand. It just needs to be a list of cards in your deck list. I've had people print out notepads before, and judges accept it. Contrary to the online forms of play Magic, there is no chess clock, so it's really bad form to play slow for both of you. The way paper Magic's time works is rather than the person that goes to 0 on their chess clock losing, when time expires, there are 5 additional turns. So if time expires during my turn, you are turn 1, I am turn 2, you are turn 3, I am turn 4, you are turn 5. After your turn, if nobody has been decided the winner, it's a draw, which means it's 1 point instead of 3 points on the standings, which is not good. This one should be obvious, but maybe if you only play digital Magic, it isn't. Don't help people that are playing. Outside assistance is literally illegal in all RELs. And then the last thing is triggers. Now, at FNM, every FNM culture I've been a part of, it's pretty bad form to let your opponent forget triggers unless, like, come to a verbal agreement of it. But especially at competitive REL, if your opponent's triggers are not your responsibility. Do not have to remind them of their triggers. And then if a game action happens, especially if it's too far to rewind, and then they realize their trigger, that's too bad. The opposite is true as well. You are 100% responsible for remembering your triggers. And in a competitive environment, your opponent is not responsible for helping you remember triggers. It's really hard to do if you're only used to digital magic. Now, I'm a competitive paper player, but the only paper tournaments I play in are competitive, which is every other weekend or so. The rest I play online, so triggers are really tough, even for someone like me. But if you felt this video was important or valuable for you in any way, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description, especially on Twitter and Discord. Join the communities there, and also on Patreon, where I post a bunch of sideboard guides and all of that stuff. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.